Last week, I released my 6 spiritual practices video and I introduced how I practice on a day-to-day basis. Now, in this video, I want to talk about the first practice, becoming one with the creator. But this week, I want to be dissecting each practice to go a little bit deeper than the way I explain in the sixth practice. Now, by the way, the last practice, subconscious conviction, I actually already have created a video. So if you search for subconscious conviction under the YouTube channel, you'll be able to find it. So let's talk about becoming one with creator. Now, the very first video that I released when I launched my YouTube channel on February 1st, 2024 was about the loss of contact with the whole. And I think the title is The Only One Reason Humans Suffer. And the only one reason, the core reason that the humans suffer, suffering comes from our thinking. Struggle is in the 3D physical world, but how we perceive the outside situation creates thinking, and thinking is what makes us suffer. But the reason that we lean into those thinking that allows us to suffer is and come from the separation, loss of contact with the whole. So becoming one with the creator is to reverse that process. Every single one of us came here and became individual body and having an individual mind. And independency has been encouraged to create and cultivate. And as a result, we have created a sense of separation. So for me, becoming one with the creator, many people are assuming at the subconscious level that they are separate creatures. So my body is here, your body is here. I have these thoughts that I'm thinking, you're thinking something different. So when we look at the world from the five sensory physical world perspective, you start going to this trap that you start seeing you and everything else in the outside separate. And that's because the very nature of the identification you is in a wrong place. So you and I are spiritual being. So that really means is that when we say, or for instance, when I say I'm not referring to my body. But many of us, when they say they think about their body or they think about their mind. Even when I say I'm not referring to my mind that thinks. Yeah. So it's really important to understand how we got here so we can go back to our home, which is the oneness of all. I used to be really close to the environment community of Bob Proctor, who was in the movie The Secret. And one of the things that I heard him saying that became my favorite is the soul is forever seeking its awareness of oneness with God. So God is grace of divinity. God is the infinite intelligence that govern this universe. And it's an operating system. And that is within us, through us. So how can we tap into that? How can we tap into that? When we come here and we are given the physical body and we start going through the process of separation, we are now wanting and seeking oneness to reconnect that awareness and sensation. So in order to accomplish that, we want to begin becoming aware of what is making us feel separate, what is making us creating this illusion of separation, because that is due to our perception and perspective. So we want to be looking at how we are actually demonstrating that on a day-to-day basis. So the practice of becoming one with the creator is really a practice of releasing and dropping all the things that we are actually doing on a day-to-day basis that's facilitating separation. Because we don't need to seek, and this is something that I have sort of cultivated and come to understand as we further develop my awareness in spiritual practices. It is not, spiritual practices and all the things that we're doing is not really about attaining that magical enlightenment and awakening. But when we remove and let go and undo and unlearn things that we have learned that constructed our false story, the false sense of who we are. And when we start letting go and removing all of those, that experience sense of oneness, becoming one with Creator, naturally arises from within, because that is ultimately and essentially who we are. Yeah. So I hope you can get that shift and the switch in a way you approach things. Many people are wanting more to obtain information and to do different practices to get closer and becoming one with the Creator. But when you attempt to do that, you are coming from the identification and you are admitting that you are a separate being, right? But then when we understand the process, the journey of the soul, that we arrive here and went through this individualization and independency, constructed false story that's covering around the essence of who we already are, which is the oneness of all, the only thing that we need to do is to practice removing those layers, that's undoing those layers that's covering the essence of who we are. So let's go through a little bit of example, because when we if I explain this, you probably get it. But what do we do exactly on a day-to-day basis? So something that I touched upon is, are you identifying yourself as your body on a day-to-day basis? Are you identifying yourself as the mind on a day-to-day basis? Can you observe your thinking? Because if you're not observing your thinking, more than likely you might be ending up identifying who you are with your thinking. So, and then another layer is the identity that we perform is dynamic. So let's think of 10 years ago, who were you performing as? 20 years ago, who you were performing as? 3 months ago, what was different, right? Now, we obtain awareness, we obtain skill set, we obtain different experiences, and then we constantly become somebody that is a little bit different, right? We start having this ability to do something. I have obtained ability to go out and then release YouTube video on a day-to-day basis. I wasn't doing that even 3 months ago, right? But that doesn't define who I am. So that is the point, right? The performing, the identification, the role that you're playing doesn't define who you are. So if you are defining yourself with your identity, that is the first thing that we must let go, which is challenging for a lot of people, because many the ego doesn't want to die, right? So if you stop defining with your identity, that means that you need to sort of let go of being attached to your identity, which is easy to do for most people. But can we begin observing that internal dialogue, internal exploration, and then be okay with it? So I mentioned two things already. So when you say I, are you identifying yourself with your body and the mind? And we're gonna observe those. Even when you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning, do you see you there, or do you see your body, or do you see your energy through your body? That's two different things. So constantly you want to have the awareness hat of seeing and understanding that what you see is a representation, manifestation, but it's not who you essentially are. You are coming and expressing through this vehicle. You are coming and expressing through this tool called the mind. But the vehicle and the tool, the body and the mind, are the vehicle and the tool, and they are not you. They are yours, and they are not you. It cannot be you and yours at the same time. So observing the usage of the I and the definition, identification of who you are identifying yourself as is the first step. The second step is to begin really looking at your identity and the role, and then whether you're defining yourself with the role that you're playing. Yeah. And I think when you start looking at attachment inside, like if you're having a difficult time letting go of that, it means that you're defining yourself with identity. So can you see how for most people it's challenging to become one with the creator, because we're choosing separation by being attached to the identity, by defining that you are one. This is an interesting topic, right? Like when I say this, I think you can clearly understand what I mean. And on one side, on one hand, many people wants to become one with the creator. Now, I explained that in order to become one with the creator, we must let go of the performance that we are implementing on a day-to-day basis that indicates separation. And many people are so much inclined to define themselves as how they're identifying yourself as the role. So number two is to really begin observing how you're defining yourself, and to not to get attached to your identity, to not to get attached to what you do, who you're performing as, and what you have. Yeah, so when you're able to separate that, you're now entering into the expansive awareness of who you are, and you will find yourself becoming one with the creator. So that's number one. Number two, let me give you one more thing. I think what we want to practice is to practice a feeling called faith. Practice a feeling called faith. So faith is this deep internal knowing that you feel okay and you feel certain when there's a certainty and when there's a contrast. So faith is a feeling that you are feeling supported and held fully when something goes wrong, and then in your intellectual mind you are not able to foresee how you can change that situation. And if you begin understanding how every happenings occur through the energetic resonance, you don't need to know the how, but you only need to stay in that energy, feeling, knowing with faith, because you're more powerful than the circumstance. If the circumstance was created through you, because everything you are attracting, it means that you can overcome and bypass it, right? So that deep knowing of the power inside of you, by cultivating the feeling and energy of faith, that would help you to stay connected with the infinite awareness of who you are. So number one, to really identify how you're really observing how you're using the I, and to not to confuse with your body and mind. Number two, to realize how you're defining yourself. Are you defining yourself with your identity? Are you defining yourself as what you do and what you have? And to not to get attached to it. And number three, to cultivate and explore the energy, knowing, feeling called faith, so that you can be the cause of expansiveness that you want to create in this physical world. So that is the three examples that you can begin implementing and use to become a creator by becoming one with the oneness of all.